Hey guys, I'm outside our 18 by 12 passive solar greenhouse, and I want to tell you about some of the lessons we learned this year. So guys, this greenhouse is 18 feet long, 12 feet deep. We're actually going to make it deeper, but we haven't got there yet. And 12 feet high at the peak. There's two of these little vents up here, windows, that are adjustable depending on the heat. I have them set to about 20 degrees is when they'll open. Along the top of the ridgeline here, you'll see some insulation. We haven't closed that in. We just stick insulation in there during the colder weather. And then we pull it out during the summer to allow it to vent out even more. Right now this setup vents really well, but on those hot summer days, it still gets pretty hot. So we have a fan that goes and blows and helps expel the warm air. My thought is I probably need a couple more of these opening vents to allow more of that heat out. That way we don't have to let the fan run. One thing I might do to actually help with more ventilation is remove this bottom piece of plastic right under this line here. I'll attach a new piece of plastic going up under the old section, but put a pipe in it all along the bottom here, and that way it'll allow me to roll this piece up to here and allow more ventilation and air to flow through the greenhouse. One of the things I didn't even think about was when I first built it, I didn't build any interior door. And what happens now is the chickens have started going into the greenhouse and pecking on stuff. I lucked out and we actually had this screen door right here that fit perfectly. So now when I open the door to allow venting, I put this screen door in the hole to prevent basically the chickens and the dogs and sometimes squirrels and chipmunks from going into the greenhouse, even though the little rodents actually get in the top vents where the insulation is. One of the options I'm thinking about for next year is actually putting a screen on all these little holes where the insulation is. That way it helps prevent some of those little rodents from going inside the greenhouse. Inside the greenhouse, this shelf that folds along the front actually works amazing for the seedlings. However, what we found on the really hot days is this plastic actually heats this up way too hot and will burn the little seedlings. So sometimes we have to actually move these off this shelf and down onto the floor. So we might make a shelf maybe back here in the middle or somewhere else where they're not getting as much direct heat and sun. Down here on the raised bed, we actually put nails and string every 1 foot to help us be able to try and organize it into square foot gardening to be more effective in our raised bed. This worked really well for us this year. We did a lot of our plants down the middle in pots. This was actually extremely beneficial because it allowed us to move stuff around based on how big something grew or how much sunlight something needed or how much water. We could separate the plants out into different positions in the greenhouse based on their needs. Our seedling shelf up front here actually worked extremely well for supporting our pepper plants which were in the front raised bed. I was going to raise this up to keep stuff out of the way, but it actually came in very handy as a support. So we did ground cherries and loofah inside the greenhouse, but in the middle of the greenhouse. This was a mistake. The ground cherries themselves do as well outside as they do in the greenhouse. So there was actually no point for us to do the ground cherries in the greenhouse. The loofah grew, but it did not produce any loofah in the greenhouse, whereas we had some loofah outside last year. And both of these in the middle actually grew up and shaded the back area from getting any light. This here is a Montreal melon. It was developed in Montreal by, I believe, a Jesuit priest. And it grows pretty good here in the greenhouse. But again, with this and our Black Mountain watermelon, it takes up a lot of space in the greenhouse. I'm going to try doing the Montreal melon outside next year because of the space it requires. It's also developed for our climate, so having it in the greenhouse doesn't make as much sense. In the front raised bed, we did a lot of herbs. Anise hyssop, savory, summer and winter, thyme, rosemary, parsley, These ones here, I actually might want to do in pots, and then I'll be able to move them around better depending on how much sun they require or water they require as well. The anise hyssop, we are actually going to move outside because it actually takes up too much space inside the greenhouse. One of the benefits though is it brings a lot of pollinators into the greenhouse as well. Tomatoes, they've taken over the greenhouse. We planted indeterminate instead of determinate tomatoes in the greenhouse. However, next year, if we're going to do any inside the greenhouse, they're going to be determinate. That way they're not going to grow as high and they're going to produce at the same time, rather than onesies and twosies that we have to come in almost every other day and harvest tomatoes. We want stuff done at the same time to be able to do big batches of spaghetti sauce, tomato paste, that sort of thing. Along the back wall, we tried to do peas growing up the wall, and we tried to do broccoli down in the bottom of the raised bed. The broccoli just got tall and actually didn't produce a head. So we're going to do that outside next year. The peas like cooler weather and cooler temperatures, so we're actually going to not do them inside the greenhouse ever again. They'll stay outside. So right by our door here, we have a small fan. It allows us to plug that in and vent air through here on those really, really hot days. What I would have liked to done, or might still do, is actually put one in the wall behind me or at the other end. That way it's not in the way of the door. We don't have to move it around when we're trying to do stuff. I don't have to run an extension cord either. If we run it by solar, it will just be able to come on and off based on temperature, and we won't have to worry about looking after it. Rain barrel. We brought this inside to try and help water and bring thermal mass inside the greenhouse for those cold days. I don't know if it's helped yet for the thermal mass, but it didn't help for the watering. What we should have done is just leave it empty, and then in the spring and fall, fill it up to be able to provide that thermal mass. Along the back of the greenhouse, our goal is still to bring that roof all the way down to the ground and enclose that area at the back. We'd like to fill it with either dirt, clay, concrete blocks, something again that can store that thermal mass and keep the greenhouse heated on those cold evenings. The roof itself we still haven't completed. It's still just plywood. We want to do a sod roof to allow for more insulation and keep that heat inside the greenhouse when we need it. In planting inside the greenhouse, if you're doing anything like indeterminate tomatoes or loofah, best bet is to actually plan where you want it to go first. Then you can actually put strings up to hold the tomatoes or supports to hold your plant, which I did not do. I kind of put stuff in the greenhouse and then realized, ooh, I might need support for that later. Best to plan that out first, make it much easier. So our peppers actually did really well. And I'm thinking for next year, we're actually going to do more peppers. We'll remove some of the stuff that didn't work as well. The fennel we had in the front garden, we should keep it outside. The cherry tomatoes, they're going to go outside. Loofahs, we'll do them back outside. A bunch of the tomatoes will probably do outside, which will allow more room for us to do more peppers in here. The melons have also done pretty good, except they take up a lot of space. So we'll try them again outside, maybe keep one or two inside. We have a squash in the back that really didn't do that well. Again, we'll start stuff earlier inside, move it to the greenhouse, and then move it outside when the weather's great. And inside the greenhouse, we'll keep for those hot weather plants that we like doing, like the peppers. So some of the questions we always get asked too is how much it cost, what we used, the dimensions. So I'll kind of do a quick overview on that. The windows here at the bottom and front were recycled. So the front height was actually based on those windows themselves. The wood on the outside and inside is all milled pine that we had from this property. So we cut about 32 trees and used those, milled them here on the property, and then used them for different structures like the greenhouse. I believe doing those 32 trees cost us about $250 to mill. and it gave us a huge amount of wood, which was very handy. So the front here is regular 6mm vapor barrier plastic. We just bought a big roll and used that for this. We still have most of the roll in the garage, so if there's any damage to the front, we'll be able to replace it easily. The two windows up here, I called the hardware store and they cut those for me, and then I just added the adjusters and built the frame for it and put that in. This part of the roof, the 2x6 supports and the 2x4s going across here, I kind of winged it, which was wrong. What I should have done is base the distances on possibly replacing this vapor barrier with sheets, plastic sheets, clear plastic sheets. I should have kept those dimensions perfectly to be able to do that later. Instead, I kind of just based these on the 6x6s below. So from here, you can see that those 2x6s are on top of the 6x6s, where I should have put them on top of a flat 2x6 spaced for plastic panels later on. The overhang on the top here is actually there to help prevent as much sun from getting into the greenhouse on those mid-summer really hot days. So it helps shade a bit inside the greenhouse. I can't remember if that was based on actual dimensions from greenhouses or from what my buddy gave me, which this greenhouse is designed on, or if I just went with a 10-foot or 12-foot 2x4 and just let it extend to what would make it easy for putting on the plywood roofing. Because we want to do a sod roof and allow more insulation on the top with that sod, we also want to bury the sides a bit more. So that's why I've added the gravel here and on the other side. Once we get that roof coming down to the ground, then I think we'll pile up more gravel on the sides to allow for more insulation as well. I'm hoping that'll also help keep any mice out during the winter. So again, the entire structure is 18 feet long, 12 feet deep, and I believe the front right here is actually about 3 feet high, and then on the peak here, right in the middle, I believe it's about 12 feet high. The front windows, I guess you would say, are actually based on a 45-degree angle to allow the best amount of sunlight into the greenhouse. So guys, I hope you found that information useful and will put it to use in your greenhouse. Please let me know in the comments if you have any other suggestions for us, or if you have any questions about the greenhouse build itself. Talk to you soon, guys. Love ya.